Everyone, welcome back to Manufacturing Hub. If you guys are watching this live, it's almost certainly on a Wednesday afternoon, unless you're in one of the parts of the world that is not North America, in which case, good morning, good evening, good everything else in between. Very excited to continue to have our Manufacturing Hub conversations. If you guys somehow managed to miss our Vlad and I's conversation last week with Ujwal, you guys should definitely go ahead and take a listen to that. We were talking about deglobalization and what those worldwide trends are going to look like and how that is going to, well, hopefully drive manufacturing back closer to where each and every single one of you live. Very excited to go. Welcome David Nichols back on to Manufacturing Hub. If you guys are longtime listeners, you will recognize the smiling face here. If not, David was previously on with us early on, episode 29 and 53, and most recently episode 127. We talked everything from DevOps to robot dogs to robotics to high-speed automation to crazy edge cases and a little bit more. So very happy to go ahead and welcome him back on in just a minute. If you guys are new here, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. If you are new here, just about every week, Vlad and I have awesome conversations with other practitioners in the space, talking about different themes and topics that hopefully you guys are interested in. If during this you've got thoughts or questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. If you guys have questions, we'll do our best to go ahead and get to them in the chat. And if we don't get to them during the live show, we'll do our best to get back to them after. Having said that, and without further ado, everyone officially welcome to Manufacturing Hub. This is episode 268. My name is Dave Griffith. Up here is Vlad Romanov, and welcoming back once again to the show, David Nichols. David, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for having me. It's good to see you again.
David, thanks for joining us. A little bit of context. You and I had a really good conversation at an event at Automate, and I wanted to continue said conversation, right? We discussed the major changes that are happening in our industry, and after reviewing some of the conversations we had earlier with you, and 127th episode was what I believe close to 3 years ago now.
Whoa.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah, it's been quite a bit of time. So a lot has happened since then. I know that you've also refocused a lot of your, I would say, endeavors, not necessarily in the grand scheme of things, but in how you execute on things.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's important to have this conversation. I think it's important to continue to evangelize these tools in our space. It's important to I would say personally, at least, give people the small wins. So I'm very excited to the conversation that we're going to have today. That being said, could you give us a reintroduction, David, please,
Sure.
as to yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I'm David Nichols. I'm the co-founder of a company called Loupe. And we founded this company in 2007. So it's been a lot of years, almost 20. And in that time, we've been doing a lot of really pioneering and interesting work in controls. We got our start working with a control platform called B&R, Industrial Automation. They're similar to like a Beckhoff, and they're one of these new kind of platforms where I was seeing even back in 2005, like I opened up their tools and it looked a lot like a software development tool. And even in 2005, when I first bumped into them, I was like, oh, this is cool. This is different. And 20 years later, here we are, continuing that conversation. And so in that time, we've been based on the West Coast of the US, primarily working in everything from like aerospace, semiconductors, metal cutting, like just every kind of industrial automation weird project you can imagine. And so a lot of that looked like energy kites or water jet cutting machines or machines that drilled holes in carbon fiber or lay down carbon fiber tape. Like our like niche, I would say, would be stuff that was really high performance or really cutting edge. We would get those kind of opportunities because the technology we're using, and kind of when other folks struggle to do it, we would be like, yeah, we can totally nail that. And that's kind of how we've been a company this whole time. So we've been out in the kind of frontier and the kind of edges of what's possible for a long time. And my passion and curiosity has been, since I was a teenager, really, it's just been like using software to control physical things. Like that's how I got into controls. And so, today we're here talking, that's informing the history of Loupe. And in the last, 3 to 5 years, we've really, I would say like my personal interest and the interest of the company has been refocused more so not just on controls, but also like complete equipment and kind of really revolutionizing the techniques behind automation, because there's so many possibilities coming out of digital world. And I think kind of to what we're going to talk about today, like really nothing bigger, I think, has come about than just what's happened in the last year. And so I'm eager to share that with you guys. And kind of, I should also say that as a part of that process and journey, a few years ago started a sort of group. I mean, I'd almost call it like a support group for for the kind of one or two engineers scattered in these different companies that were interested in both like thinking about automation as a software engineering project.
Hmm.
And that group is called SASE, the Society of Automation Software Engineers. And it's primarily a Slack group. And so it was kind of me saying, hey, like we're working in these ways, we're using source control, we're using CI/CD tools, we're using all these software engineering flavored tools to like ship real machines and run PLC projects. Who else even knows what we're talking about? And so we had, not there, we say there's dozens of us who are doing that. And so that Slack community in that group, you can check it out at sase.space, join.sase.space. And that cluster of people, maybe a couple thousand people that are sort of registered for that, are really passionate about that. And yeah, I'm interested here. It's been an inspiring community, and a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today has been stuff that I've picked up secondhand or been inspired by people in that group. So eager to share more about what we've been doing there.
David, let me ask you an interesting question based on your background, right? So now with all the context of the projects that you've done under Loupe, but also the knowledge of the platforms you have utilized, if you were
Mm-hmm.
to advise someone pursuing a similar path today, right, with the tools that we have available, would you
Yeah.
advise them to select the same platforms, or would you maybe make a different choice in 2026?
Lads wants to get right into it. I think the way that I'll answer the question is the SASE logo is a Venn diagram, and the overlapping circles are automation engineering, to which I mean mechanical, electrical, mechatronics, like that kind of like OT, right? Like OT
Hmm.
engineering, and the other circle is software engineering. And SASE and what we're talking about and what Loupe does is very much the fusion of those two things into something that I think is distinct and new. And so I don't know that the platform matters in some ways more than ever, in some ways less than ever, because the
Hmm.
tools are getting to be the point where like it's so fluid, right? Like you hear these stories about these open source projects that rewrote their entire code base in a different programming language in a week, right? And so it's like I think that kind of thing is going to be more prevalent, or we're going to be less stuck with the tools because of those kind of things that are coming about. But yeah, if people are interested, or they're kind of what's behind that, it's like you really need to know your stuff when you're shipping equipment. You really need to know your stuff when you get a call at 2 a.m. In terms of what's happening in the physical world, and then yeah, you need to have some software chops too. Like it's really both.
Hmm.
Um,
Dave, you have some thoughts on that front?
I do. I guess I have two wildly diverging thoughts. I guess first and foremost, I would agree to David's comments that the platforms probably matter less now, middle of 2026, than they did 2 years ago or 5 years ago. And to some extent, platform to platform probably will continue to matter less and less. I think it will be all of the other tangible value adds that you get
mhm.
across the platforms, all of the different connectors, the APIs, the MCP servers, and then pricing and how easy it is to go ahead and download and distribute are probably
Yeah.
going to be key factors into what software platforms succeed versus fail into the future.
Mhm.
I will go pause if David has some other thoughts on that as well.
Well, I think there's kind of a like no true Scotsman aspect of like if only we had a platform that had here's
Yep.
my ten must-haves.
Yep.
Hmm.
And I was actually having a conversation on SASE where somebody here's what the platform in the future needs, and I was like, well, BNR already does all those things,
Hmm.
so I don't think that this is a technical limitation issue, right?
Hmm.
And it's cultural, it's about organizations, it's not really a technical issue, like as much as
Yeah.
we love and care about the technology, I mean, I've been working in areas where the technological gap and, you know, the cost of performance gap has been so extreme. And I've been sitting here being like, why doesn't everybody use this? It's like, well, there are reasons. You know, some of them are good, some of them are not as good. You know, I think, but it's like, it's more about culture and risk taking and kind of, and I mean that in a reasonable way. What's a reasonable and appropriate risk to take to kind of advance and kind of get benefit from that, right? No risk, no reward. And so I think the technology is here. Like that's something that I think we kind of gets into how we want to introduce this. It's like, you don't have to wait around for some utopian future platform. Like all the tools are already here. So if the industry is slow to adopt or changing, it's not because of technical limitation. It's because of other organizational cultural limitations, which is also why we're like trying to build community with SASE, and kind of like it's about individual people, plant managers, like companies that are saying, you know, it's got to be X, Y, or Z for these reasons. And, you know, those are the things that I think where there are sort of opportunities to make a difference and really change things, but because it's not a technical argument at this point.
I would say, I guess, like in the past, right, and I think this gap is shrinking, but it was that, let's say, if you're within the platform and you have hardware that needs to be integrated into the same ecosystem, it is a
Yeah.
lot easier, right? Like that
Yeah,
manufacturer, and
sure.
again, without
Yeah.
like naming names, they're going to have documentation, they're going to have tutorials, they're going to have, and again, I use that a bit in air quotes because I'm also frustrated by the lack of documentation and tutorials in our
Right.
industry, but it's easier, right, if you bring in, let's say, like sensors and remote IO of the same manufacturer into, let's say, their PLC or control system. But I think, as you said, like
Yeah.
it's definitely going to be like a lot easier and a lot more scalable between different platforms, right? Like at the end of the day, like you can now write APIs to whatever,
Yeah.
as long as you have that documentation, right?
Yeah. And I think I probably mentioned this on other episodes before, but it's also a question of, you know, who's motivated and why. Because it's reasonable to say, you know, and I like to make the analogy kind of in automotive technology to people saying, listen, we heard a lot about this electronic fuel injection, but really all of our technicians, they only know how to service carburetors. And they know how to look in the little carburetor jet with a not to find a little, this is what our staff is. So this is what we want to continue to use carburetors. Like, well, do you care about fuel efficiency? Do you care about, you know, that's sort of always the battle between sort of what people know, what people are comfortable with, and what people are good at, and what the organization's effective versus like there are big opportunities, you know, in terms of innovation or introducing new technology, and that's no different here, right? And there's a lot of carburetors in industrial automation, if you ask me.
Maybe more carburetors than anything else in industrial automation.
It's all carburetors.
And let's step into the actual change that happened, right? Because, and David, I've mentioned this to you in the past, like I still have a lot of conversations where I think people have been disappointed with the early stages of AI, right? Whether that's, you know, asking them like a mathematical question or something where maybe the prompt was not properly formulated. And they just kind of, well, like this is nonsense. This is not what I would see myself using. That being said, there's obviously a huge difference between the tools, between the way you prompt. A lot has changed since the release, which was now, what, 3 years ago? I continue to think like 2, but I think it's 3 now where LLMs were really kind of like released. So I guess like what has changed if we were to define a critical moment?
Yeah, I think to me there's 2 moments, and the first is the ChatGPT release. And that's just, everybody knows it, everybody remembers that, what that was like. And you know, it was really fascinating and interesting for what it could do, where it's like, write me a limerick about my boss, but make it like a pirate, and make me a song about whatever. And it's like, it's shocking that you would type that into a web page and then it would, what it could do. Like already you're just like, whoa. So I think that's sort of like what we would all look back on as like the first contact. But then, you know, it goes on and it's like, okay, I'm tired of seeing these limericks from my coworkers. Just like, enough already. Like, this is starting to get annoying. And like, it did have legitimate issues of like 2 + 2 = 5, giving, you know, different, all this volatility on like, it's too sycophantic. It's going to agree with you, whatever you say. And I think what's been amazing is like how fast things have changed. But to me, I had kind of set it aside. Like I was talking with my partner a year ago, and she was like, "I remember when I asked you about AI, and you were like, yeah, I don't see it yet, right? Even post Chat GPT, I was like, I've played with it. I've asked it to do stuff. I don't see it. The impact isn't here yet." But that changed like at one particular moment, and that is, Davey says Claude is down. It changed at a particular moment. I started hearing about something called Claude Code, and that was in the fall of last year. I just said Claude Code, Claude Code, Claude Code, and at the time I didn't know what Anthropic was. I was like, Anthropic makes Claude Code? Okay, I guess we all know that now. But I remember in January we were looking, speaking of SASE, SASE's been on this old website platform that I just was so annoyed with. It was a terrible experience for new users, stuff like that. And I was like, I need to replace it. We need to make a new website. I was like, well, I've been hearing about this Claude Code. Like, let me just download it and try it. And I said, I'm the founder of SASE. I run this website at this address. I want you to make me a new static website, and I want it to be VS Code themed. I want the website to look like VS Code. And then I just enter. And it made the site. It did so many things. First of all, the fact that it made it at all and did what I asked for and took the content from the real site and made a static site, made all the decisions about how I was going to do that. It made a sidebar like the file browser for the different navigation points of the website. I was like, I didn't tell it to do that. That's a cool idea. And it did exactly what I said in three prompts. And I was like, I don't really like it like that. The colors aren't quite right. Use the actual colors from VS Code. It's like, oh, let me go look those up. Does it in another 2 minutes? It's been updated. Mm-hmm. And I just sat back from my keyboard and I was like, that's the craziest thing I've ever seen, because it should not be able to do that. Like typing 4 sentences or 5 sentences into a computer should not be able to do that. Now, I didn't ship that site, but like that moment to me was, I'll just call it the Claude Code moment, because that's the other thing that I think will be as big or bigger than sort of ChatGPT, because it's like, whoa, this actually is really useful. And it's like, it feels like it's just getting started. In the meantime, there's like a ton of that I would love to talk about, sort of like what that meant. But basically, like if you haven't played with it, or you tried AI early on, or at any time in that case, and it's been a while, if you haven't already picked that up, or it's time to look at that again, because to me, it's as big or bigger. The difference from before ChatGPT is when the models from Claude and the frontier models from Claude and Anthropic have been what they've been doing for the last 6 or 7 months.
For me, I would say, like brief side comment, the experience was a little bit different, but I would say just as transformative as you're describing, right? So I used to build websites way back when on Dreamweaver. I don't know if you remember that software.
No, I remember.
I still remember like putting websites with like, it was still HTML, but it was like iframes and like nested iframes and really bad, right? But over the years, right, like I remember doing it on WordPress, and to this point, I have some websites on Webflow. But, my experience with AI was, I would write a very basic, let's say like prompt saying like, hey, I want a personal website. And of course it would create a page, right? Like without any issues, like here's a page. Sometimes it would get some of the information wrong. If, the name is too generic, it would do a search and obviously need to have some like readjustments. But I think like as I learned the different tools, right, as you can feed it different screenshots of the website you want, if you're clear about the references, it becomes significantly better. And not just that not just the layout. I think like for me, the selling point was really kind of like the APIs, because it can go and review the documentation for, even like, let's take something as simple as a podcast, right? Because we're obviously on one. You need to have hooks into the platforms that create RSS feeds. Right. And usually you go into the API of that platform, and of course you're going to get the documentation, but going through it yourself is a pretty painful process. Unless you're a software engineer, like it's not something that I would say the general public can figure out. But now you can literally point the AI, here's the API documentation. It will iteratively go through the API, implement, and then review if it actually works. Like it's and again, like it is nuts. Like when I first saw that and it actually worked, extremely surprising moment. You know what I mean? And not just the basic use case.
I think to continue that story and to kind of say, yes, and I think it'll be a short jump off into kind of how does this apply to automation world. But I did finally redo the SASE website about a month ago. And I did a similar thing I think I did it with Fable and Claude Code. And yeah, I was like, here's a site. I want to make a static site. I don't know what the latest static site cool kid framework is. I would have put it on GitHub pages or even worse, right? It's like it downloaded libraries I've never heard of because it's like, and I looked them up. I'm like, I never heard of that. It's like, oh, actually, this is the coolest. This is the right choice. As a builder, if you're building a static site, you should probably use this framework. It just did it, right? And not only that, it built the site for me. I was like, yeah, make these changes. I don't like how this section worked. It had really good solutions to I just said, I don't like this section. I think it should be like that. It's just like, oh, how about we split it like this? It just came up with a solution, not an answer to not here's the fix, go implement it. Like, I don't like how this part of this section of the site works. And it proposed a change and it did it. I was like, that looks great. But not only that, it made the site, and there was some rearranging that was going to have to happen because it was changing DNS. It said, hey, I noticed you're using Cloudflare for DNS. They can host static sites. And by the way, if you use the Wrangler app, if you use the Wrangler NPM library, I can write the code that will interact with Cloudflare to deploy the site. You want me to go ahead and deploy it to you and get it set up for you? Let me know when you're ready to throw the switch. And I just wrote yes. And the site's live. It did all of the backend deployment for me as well. And it set up all these workers because the Slack integration of writing code that hits this link and redirects it. It wrote all this Slack integration code for me. It deployed it to Cloudflare. So it's it's not just writing the code, it's also administering it. And then it's let's set up a test. I'll put a timer on and 20 minutes later, I'm going to hit the site to see if this link still works. It's yeah, test pass. I was like, okay, good. I guess we're all set then, right? I started at 9 a.m. I was finished at 2. Completely redoing the site and redoing the backend and redoing the user flow and deploying it. And I was like, this is amazing. The AI was changing all the infrastructure on the site as well. And I was like, yeah, this looks good. I'm looking at it. I see what it's doing. It's telling me what it's working. It's working. And site's up. So yeah, it's really shocking how far it's come. And yeah, there's been a lot of changes even in that time, even the last 6 or 8 months. The advice they would give about prompting, or here's what this model versus that model, how it wants to behave and kind of how you should interact with it. It's changing so rapidly. And even the stuff where it's hallucinations, we don't even say hallucinations anymore. We forgot about hallucinations because it's it doesn't do that really anymore. Maybe a little, that's how fast things are changing. But they're changing in a way where it's gaining more and more advanced, honestly, understanding, good taste. It's a good engineer. Quad is a really, really good engineer. It's scary how good it is.
Let me ask you a follow-up, I guess, on the industrial side. So obviously you've been pushing your engineers and team to utilize Claude as much as possible. And I know that you've mentioned a couple of examples when we spoke in private, but I'm curious how that has changed your workflow for Loupe and the engineering team, like I said, as a whole on the industrial side, as opposed to maybe some of these web applications.
Yeah, I think I could speak to it in 2 ways. One is sort of in our work as an integrator, right? Here's what an SI needs to. SI needs to look at a system or look at a proposal, and we need to talk to people and do discovery and come up with a plan and da-da-da-da. Here's the scope of work, in terms of being an engineering company that operates in that way, the entire process it's incredibly speeded up. Coming into, I'm actually pretty concerned for SIs because, and again, if you're listening to this, and we're going to issue you proposals, sorry in advance, but it's what our team can do we used to talk in 6-week sprints, right? Let's work in iterative 6-week sprints because this is how long it's going to take to get into it. It's what we can accomplish in 6 weeks is 5 times more in terms of the software deliverables, in terms of the features, in terms of what we can accomplish and cover. It's tremendously faster in terms of the work that our guys are doing. And a lot of times that is software flavored work, but what our best team and best coders are able to produce and deliver in that timeline is shockingly fast. What used to take 6 weeks would take 2. To speak more specifically on a case that we looked at, we had somebody that brought us in and said, hey, there's this junky old machine running Windows 7 with a VB6 app. And, you know, I'm not going to name the robot, but it's doing a, you know, operation processing plastic part, you know, that you've seen probably in other places. And they're like, this machine is down all the time. You know, if this PC goes, like, this cell is down and our entire production is dependent on it. Like, again, tell me how many times we see this stuff every day, right? So our guy started looking at it, and I saw a Slack message that the lead engineer was working on. He just posted this page, and it's the entire flow, the entire state flow of the robotic cell. Like this beautiful thing with all these like diagrams and arrows. It looks just like a state diagram here from execute into this operation, loop back to this. Here's the error condition. Like it's like a UML chart, right? And I'm looking at it like, and I asked him, I was like, where did this come from? Thinking like this must have been the documentation from the original integration team that did it. He's like, I put all the raw docs and like the raw text file from the robot into a folder, and I told Claude to make a state diagram. It reverse engineered the entire cell in 30 minutes.
Nice.
And made this beautiful diagram. I was like, this is better documentation than they've ever had of this cell. And even in that documentation, you're like, oh yeah, I see why their machine is breaking. It's because it doesn't have the right error recovery fault thing. Like you can see it right in the chart, right? As an engineer, you're looking at it, you're like, but the quality and the thoroughness that machine could be basically reverse engineered, even documented, right? Even if you're just like, we just want to know how this works, just like throw all the stuff and be like, make me the documentation, show me how this cell works. You could also probably ask it like, what bugs would you anticipate, or what bugs can you see in the code? And it would tell you that too. But what was most amazing to me was like all of the analysis of like, how does this weird machine work? It was able to do, and it was producing artifacts and documents and descriptions, things that we otherwise would spend weeks building, right? Or more likely not spend weeks building because we ran out of time because we had to ship the tool, right? And so what's amazing and I think interesting to consider for us is like, it's changing everything about engineering practice. Everything is flipping completely on its head, right? It used to be a rewrite. If you're talking software or talking PLC programs, a rewrite would be like, never do it. It's the dumbest thing you can do. Or like, you have to do it very carefully, piece by piece. You know, we're going to take this, we're going to evolve this so slowly because time is software is expensive. There's all these things lurking in software that you don't know about. It's like, now it's like, oh, screw it, rewrite it. It'll take a week. And it'll work better, and it'll be better documented, and it'll have better tests, and it'll have better coverage, and it'll perform better. And so, I mean, as an integrator, I'm thinking like, man, like control retrofits just got a huge discount. Like anybody out there wants a AI powered control retrofit, like call Loupe. Like it doesn't matter what the files are, like it'll be able to be reverse engineered and rebuilt extremely quickly. And so, yeah, that's a big part of where we're like, yeah, you know, I don't know how that's going to apply to like complete equipment and other stuff like that. But it's like, I think it's going to be important, but like in terms of like, let's redo this software, like it's like open season on old controllers.
I think that's really interesting. I know, like, especially talking about the documentation, that for me is one of the first major things that really impressed me. Back first quarter of this year, kind of early spring, Vlad has probably heard me say several times that there are, you know, process flow diagrams and operational flow diagrams and value stream mapping that I do not anticipate ever once again doing by hand, in large part because it's such huge time sinks. And then when it comes to the presentation, it becomes, how can I present this in a way, in a manner that just doesn't look like insane spider webs on an endless flow diagram? And now I can just go build it into an HTML web page, and I can zoom in and out, and I can go put it together. Well, I can go dump all of my notes and information into it, and Claude will go build it for me in half an hour or a morning or whatever the compute takes, and go back and forth a couple of times, and suddenly it's up and running. And it extremely expedites that. Wireframing early on, like that, what we would have to do by hand, I can go build everything into skills, and this is what the skills look like, and this is what the framework looks like, and let's go build this in particular. And if we love it, fantastic, and if not, we'll just go drag it around and change it live in person. So,
you know,
for me, I think
Yeah, I do want to comment too that like a lot of this stuff, like a lot of the diagrams and PowerPoints and even documentation, a lot of it is incidental in terms of like what actually needs to happen, right? Like we're trying to produce something, we're trying to make a machine that works. Those are all tools that are like trying to support that. But the process of making the equipment itself is also changing really rapidly. Like another guy on SASE did a presentation where he had done the safety system of like a laser lab. This is in Europe. They've got these huge lasers that are centralized, and there's all these labs where they route the laser through the building. And anyway, it's lasers going all over this building, and they're dangerous. So you need like really good safety equipment. One day, the lab gets this donation of this new giant laser, and it has, like we've seen, like a device, complicated device you'd see in integration. Here's a 100-page PDF of our Ethernet spec, right? Here's all this control where, it's like, you can do this action and you can do this action. Here's all the parameters. It's 100 pages long, right? Of this sophisticated Ethernet device. It could be, just think of it like a laser marker, or labeler, any of these kind of like plug-in Ethernet gluer, anything like that, where we'd be like, what's the minimum set that we need for this machine? Because this is going to be a pain in the ass to get working. And in this presentation, this guy in SASE is like, we just handed it the PDF and it wrote the code for every function and all the tests of the function, and it worked on the first try, talking to it. So now it's like, now we just have a library that can talk from our controller to this, and it does every single function that this thing could do, and it works. And it took a day. That would be a 6-week project.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, it doesn't take any time. Now it's like, that's true for everything else that talks Ethernet now. Right. And so I feel like a lot of our job at SIs would be like, how do we patch all this stuff together? It's going to take a while even to get this minimal subset working, because we're having to like bit bang by hand or like write serial drivers. It's like, that's done. Right. Also, use whatever you want, because we can plug it in for free. Right. Like, what are machines going to be like now that that's possible? That's crazy.
Well, look, the important question, right? We got a good question in the chat, which resonates with me as well. And this comes from Marcel. And it says, do you think that kind of end-to-end execution changes who gets to be a builder now, or does it mostly just make existing technical people dramatically faster, right? And maybe to add on to that, right, to your point, David, it's now a lot easier, but still the three of us in this conversation, we've had that experience, right? So you understand Ethernet drivers, you understand, RS-232, 485, whatever other protocols, and you can still have some sanity check, right? Whereas, do you think that a person with zero technical knowledge would be able to, obviously, like one-shotting that, I think is maybe an exception. Maybe we'll get a lot better as time goes on. But do you think you still need that technical knowledge to be able to get to that level?
I think in this changing time, when we're building trust with these systems and they're going from being legitimately untrustworthy to being incredibly good at what they do, there's still an important role of, and maybe this will continue to be the case forever, of somebody saying, I'm an engineer, I'm a human, I understand the context, I know what's needed here, I'm glancing at this and this looks good to me. Like in my job as a CEO or manager or leader of technical teams, that's already my job a lot of times. Right? Because somebody's here, they're like, I'm just in the back of the room, like hopefully not saying anything, but sometimes being like, hold on, I have a question. What about that? Right? Like, and so there's still that job to do, which is like, but notice I'm saying that we've got teams of people doing that for us right now. We also have teams of AIs doing it for us now. I think it's not just technical. Like, yes, the technical people are going to be advanced in terms of what they can deliver a lot more quickly. But I think but there's a couple of things there. One, it's harder to, and I think in software engineering, it's like the apocalypse, right? It's just like, if you're a software engineer, your job is to like type the code in, like, and that's what you have spent your career so far doing. Like, that's scary. Because you look at it and you're like, I could never touch this, right? It's like watching the steam shovel, right? Like it's a kid's story, steam shovel instead of by hand. Like you can't compete with it. It's like, this is industrial revolution level of change and displacement, which is scary. But at the same time, you're like, as a manager, you're used to going to a human and saying like, hey, here's kind of what's going on. Here's the project. Here's a bunch of context for you. Here's what I want to see. Here's some limitations. Come back to me. And that's the people that are used to doing that, and the people that are good at that that's the skill now. And again, I don't know how this is going to change. Ask me again in a year, right? But it's like, that's what is good at, because people, if you're a human manager, you're used to somebody coming back and be like, here you go, boss. And you're like, this part's great. I must have not said something right, or like we must have missed some context for you, or like, let me try that again. Right, here's the prompt. Go back and do this again and come back to me. Right. So I look at what AI does and I'm like, this is great. It's just like a real engineer. It makes mistakes all the time, and you just nudge it back and forth, and then it's like you get what you need. Right. So like whereas I think the technical folks are more like, I saw it made a mistake. Like if you're an engineer, you're just thinking in terms of like right and wrong, correctness. Like this is more of a philosophical thing, like, or your value, like you're valued in like getting the right answer technically. Then I think that skill is like, now you're competing with technology that's like incredibly good at making those decisions. But also you're like, it's more important that you would have a picture of like, why are we building it? What are we building? Should we build this or should we build that? Like, that's still really important. But that's been more of like a design and leadership or management function, right? This is like revenge of the managers. Because those management skills are applicable to AI today.
Yeah, and it's an interesting discussion, right? It's just I've at least like talked to a few manufacturers, and I think I've mentioned this to you in an off-stream conversation where they're trying to figure out, who do we bring on board? How do we upskill people? Because again, like historically, at least in the past, the industrial space, as you mentioned, is a little bit more risk averse than I would say the software space, right? If you go to, let's say, like Meta or Google, it is known that they can run very segmented tests even for the most critical applications where like only a certain amount of people are affected. Let's say the Facebook application goes down, and they can just revert back to whatever state. In manufacturing, it's not as easy as we all know. So I think there's this concern of how quickly you let the newer generation of engineers kind of like loose with AI, because I think you have the confidence, but at the same time, like someone needs to have built the knowledge of the process side, the mechanical side, where they can again like conduct a sanity check. So that's why I think like Marcel's question is very good and topical. And I also don't have an answer. I think we'll see where the cards fall, so to speak, and some companies will be more bullish than others and potentially win as a result of that, right? And maybe there will be this kind of how would you call it? Maybe like an oscillation where like, hey, like maybe we've gone a little bit too far. We gotta like back off just a little bit and get these guys get the process and the mechanical experience in before they can implement the software side. So it's going to be interesting either way.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say, if I may, to David's previous points and to Marcel's question, I kind of look at it like it allows everyone to go up a rung or a couple of rungs in what they're doing, right? It allows the novice who maybe wants to get into an application, or maybe wants to go do some software programming, or maybe wants to build an app or something like that, to skip several hundred hours of testing and doing a very poor job scraping together their first app. And it allows them to go ahead and learn how to go through the process of doing that. It allows the people who are doing that to get to the orchestration point, to David's point of, we are saying, this is the parameters and these are the boundaries, and go burn some tokens and see what you come back with. And if it works well, that's fantastic. And if it not, we'll go from there. And maybe they're doing one of those, maybe they're doing two or three of those in parallel. And it allows kind of the managers and the solutions architects who are used to having several of those projects to be up and running, to go down the path of being much more successful as they're deploying and putting together projects more and more. I in fact had a conversation yesterday with a gentleman who runs a software development company, and he said he has something to the effect of 20 people on his staff, and they will go ahead and go through the process of building whatever it is that they're building. And he also said over the course of the last 6 months, he himself can do the entire work that the team was doing 6 months or a year ago. Yeah. And it's just...
Did he fire all of them? or
No. Well, I mean, so he made the comment that is not how the business is built and run. It may be as there's attrition and other people who leave, they don't go backfill and they don't do other things. And I also don't really think that he wants to go spend 10 or 12 hours a day in front of a whole bunch of agents going and trying to go replicate the work of 20 people. Having said that, it is just it is a force multiplier, right? And I think that what we're seeing is it's a force multiplier, and it can be a force multiplier for good, and I think it can also be a force multiplier in the effect that we've got more forward thinking, and we've got sometimes larger companies, and we've got sometimes smaller startups who are willing to go leverage these tools and go rebuild workflows and make gargantuan shifts, and suddenly you can have the 10-person team doing as much work as what the 50 or 60-person team was doing a year ago if they're able to successfully leverage some of these tools.
Yeah, I mean, Loupe is in a phase where it's fairly small at the moment because of the ups and downs of the SI world, and I think what we're thinking about for the future is just, I do think that the difference in terms of being able to punch above your weight
Mm-hmm.
is extreme. It's what you can do with 10 people is, I concur with what he's saying. And for us, that means like we want to go compete with people that have 60 or 100 people on their staff
Mm-hmm.
and do it faster and do it at a higher quality than them and at a lower cost.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Absolutely.
that's what we're doing.
Absolutely. In that direction, Marcel's got another question, or like a follow-up to that. He says, do you think that the winners end up being the companies that adopt AI fastest, or ones that build the best human review loops so they can move fast without flooding themselves with expensive mistakes and AI slop? Or maybe I'll go put that back up so you can finish reading. Or maybe, what do you, David, imagine that the winners of this next arms race are going to look like?
I think that they're going to, well, I don't know what the way that I want to answer the question is this. It's like, as a leader of an SI and as a leader of engineering teams, like, it's humans that are doing the work, right? So
Mhm.
when we get into an AI context, suddenly it's like, well, the performance needs to be perfect, otherwise it's not as good. Well, if you've worked with humans or you work in the real world,
Yeah.
that's what we're up against, right? I don't need to run faster than the tiger. I only need to run faster than you, right? That's in terms of how we're dealing with, in terms of how we're thinking about quality. I don't. I think that it's like, well, do you want to fight AI? There's a balance between, like, are we fighting AI slop or the fact that we're going to lose some sort of like architectural awareness? If that helps you move faster and get to market faster,
Mhm.
it's just as dangerous to be too slow. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's something that I've seen. So I don't worry about that as much. It is a degree of a balance point. If stuff takes too long, you miss the opportunity, or it doesn't happen, or you're like, yeah, it's going to take $1 million to do that. They're like, clients like, no, we're not going to do that. Right. And so I think I'm, the last three times I came on the show, I'm sure I was like, automation needs to take more risks. Like, this is not hard. I
Yeah.
think this is the case. It's just as much the case now, because the payoff and the upside in terms of like the gap is like bigger than ever. So yeah, there's risk in terms of making mistakes, same risk as humans making mistakes when they build machines.
I really hope that we see actual data, right? Because to Marcel's point, right, companies that adopt AI can mean a lot of different things, right? Like we've
Yeah.
rolled out a license of Copilot, which
Right.
sits on top of our current Microsoft subscription, will be labeled as we've adopted AI, right? And to me, like I said, you really need to get in the weeds, but it ultimately, at least for me, comes down to what are they using, what are they doing with it, and
Yeah.
is it, again, like some surface level type of, hey, we're massaging emails and we're augmenting the team's communication, or we're
Yeah. We're
recording
having to write
conversation.
100 blog posts that no one wants to read. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think, like, I would really want to see the data, and I would be, I guess, like, or I would say that my general sentiment is almost like disappointment at this point, where I talk to engineers who aren't pushing at least some of their time using AI. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
understand that there's corporate requirements, and I understand, certain vendors, especially in our space, it's difficult, right? Like, there is a challenge, but at least when you speak with them outside of their like work hours, they should be trialing things. as there's a lot of opportunities to improve the processes. You know what I mean? But yeah,
Yeah.
like adopt AI, I think is just too broad of a label. So
And at the same time, like there is like a red pill, blue pill moment right now. Like
Mhm.
I think that that's a good analogy, because it's like, you want to go back to what you want to go back what you're doing and kind of pretend like nothing's happening. Like you can do that. Like, and companies can do that, individuals can do that. It's been interesting, even within SASE, which is a group of like very passionate nerds, that are like very on the in cutting edge of this. And there's some, including Davey in the chat. Shout out to Davey, who's been at the leading edge of it, where he's like really, really telling, like, people have come up and be like, yeah, I keep hearing about this. What should I do? And everybody's stepping in. There's no substitute for sitting down with the tools firsthand and trying something and having that moment where you're like, just the analogies that I try to make are like, just throw the ball as far as you can, as hard as you can. Thing's going to catch it and run right back to you. And you're going to be like, wow, what else can it do? Right? Like, the firsthand experience of working with something like that is really important, right? Like, you can hear people talk of, again, AI pilled CEOs talk about, like me, talk about, oh, here's all this stuff, or it's buzzwords. Just try it, right? Just put in and try it. And specifically, I would say, get a paid cloud account and try that in different ways. Like, because even within the AI world, everyone's turning around and saying, chasing after Anthropic at this point,
Mhm.
right? Like, companies like SpaceX and Meta are nuking their entire strategies because they're trying to turn to catch up with these guys, right? Like, that's how important it is. Davey, nerd is a term of endearment, by the way, in the chat. Nerds, I love you, nerds.
David, let me maybe steer us back into the conversation on some practical examples, right? And in our
Mm-hmm.
space, I would argue that there's maybe a couple of different phases that I'm at least observing in almost every project, right? And I outlined them a little bit for those who are listening to us and looking at us in the show notes. But they are the initial phase, right? Where you have to go
Mm-hmm.
and speak with the customer, you have to collect information. Hopefully, it's all there. Obviously, in most cases it is not. You need to have a lot of conversations with different stakeholders. You need to submit proposals. You need to obviously then have conversations, revisions of the proposals. We have the development phase, right? This is where I would say
Mm-hmm.
the actual, I would say, software and hardware creation, if you will, takes place. You generate the software, you create panels, bill of materials, etc. Deployment phase, right? This is where your commissioning takes place, FAT,
Mm-hmm.
VAT, or SAT, depending on which industry you're in. And of course, you have this post-deployment phase, which is like maintenance, customer education on the process. Obviously, there might be changes, for the operator on how the machine works. I'm curious if you could maybe give us some thoughts or like examples of how you see AI changing some of these phases, and where, again, for like, because I ultimately want to reach those that haven't experienced it yet, to give them
Mm-hmm.
maybe certain wins where in the past maybe they have seen, like we discussed, some issues where now they could truly, I would say, cut their time, fivefold, tenfold, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's there's almost like there's really good AI analogies, like, because well, we're all talking about this sort of like context and context windows and things like that. And if you think about whether it's an internal team or you're an SI coming in and saying, we're looking at this production line, now we're starting to have a conversation about context. What are you guys trying to produce? What are the issues? What do you care about? How many need to come in and out? Like, all this discussion of like what's happening here and why and what is the goal. Like, those are all things that are, you can just collect by talking about it now, right? And just like vast amounts of information of like, we're just meeting with people, we're talking, asking, doing interviews, again, informal, just
Mhm.
like we would be talking about it. You're walking the line with something, looking at taking all old, whatever old docs or whatever documentation is there, and throwing it together in a way where the synthesis and the analysis of that kind of like huge amounts of data of like, here's how the machine's supposed to work, is something that AI is incredibly good at, because it can just like parse through everything and be like, summarize, no, shorter, no, now make me the control diagram, now make me the flow diagram. Like, these are things that it can produce by just reading transcripts of conversations and looking at looking at all the documentation, just the stuff that you're pulling out of drawers or pulling out of PDFs, right? So it's like, in terms of what needs to get built here, and how are we going to transfer the information about what needs to get done to this group of people that are going to build something, like that is completely changed by AI in terms of its speed, and also in terms of like, and here's what we're going to do about it. Like, here's what I think that the proposal should be, is something, the kind of thing you can just like rattle it off verbally, be like, make me the proposal, make me, build me the doc that I'm going to send to the client. Like those are things that we've, not that long ago, would spend weeks and weeks and weeks doing, that can now be done in days, and done better than we did before, so that's pretty amazing. And then in development, I'm come back and talk to you guys about like, let's try to turn this into a software engineering project. It's even more so valuable to do it now, because now developing software is something that can happen at a very high quality level extremely quickly for not a lot of money. That was the opposite was the case before, right? So all these processes are designed around, it's going to be expensive to have people sit here and program it and figure it out and do it. All the stuff about source control, digital twin, automated testing systems, all those things, all those tools from software engineering, AI is also fluent in them, and it can do it just as good or better than humans. So it's like, being able to turn the development process for an equipment with a digital twin, with other types of tooling like that turns the project into software, means that you can just prompt your way through it. Reuse of libraries, things like that. Those are all things that if you can make that shift, then you can use these tools, and that shift is more valuable than ever for that reason in terms of the development phase. And it's also things where we can do it in advance. We can do it concurrently to mechanical. Like, we can have it running in digital twins before, and we can learn things, we can test things, so that we're building the right tool. Building the right tool is significantly faster in the development phase. And then, yeah, I think I just could go on and on about it. Like, I've also seen people, first and secondhand stories of, oh, I just had Claude spin up an OPC server, and it's just like poking data back and forth into a real PLC to test what's going to happen, and to look at data and be like, change this code until you can figure out what's happening. And the interface is OPC, and it can do that, right? Because you can just talk OPC you write some Claude code thing, some test rig that's going to do that. It's going to poke directly into your hardware. Like, that's what I mean to say, like, it's already here now. It's already applicable now. It's already way more than good enough now for all these phases. And, speaking of busy work that we didn't want to do, we've shipped projects where I was like, oh, we shipped in the whole manual? Who sat down and did that? They're like, yeah, don't worry about that. We did read it. We did check and make sure that it was right. It is correct. Now the operators of that tool, wherever in the world it is, they have the benefit of that, or maybe they're going to feed that to their AI and it's going to tell them how to fix the machine. But it's like, that's stuff now that just could be done at just an incredible degree of thoroughness that by hand it just would have been way too much, or just wouldn't have gotten done.
It's very interesting, right? Like, as you mentioned this, I'm also reflecting on some of my workflows and recent projects, and the commissioning phases, for example. And I see the younger engineers, they always pull up the chat GPT where they can just snap the photo of the fault code on the VFD, right? And they're just like, oh, well, like, what is this code? And then they just they adjust the parameter like on the fly. And I'm like thinking to myself, to our earlier point, like, how do you also like fact check that everything is good, but at the same time, like, no one's going to read manuals anymore, right? Like, we're also going to be like so reliant, like the tools are so good at this point. Like, I'm not going to read 300 pages because that's going to take however many hours.
You don't
just
need
parse
to.
it and,
yeah,
well, exactly.
You'll know if the line works when you hit start. You know what I mean? Like, you'll know. And again, back in my day, all we had was Google and Stack Overflow, and we were happy with it. And it was not that different than just, let me just throw this thing in here. Like, it's, again, I don't know that it's. I think the impact and the quality and the ability of these models is shocking, but like, it's been a continuum, right? It's like, before that, it'd be like, I remember when we didn't have Google, so we couldn't even get the manual. You have to have the manual on the shelf, right? Like that was, this is the kind of stuff where it's like, it is really enabling people to, and they'll learn enough by trying.
Yeah, I think it's again, I think it's revolutionary in many different ways. Like I said, to some extent get disappointed when people like discredit it too fast, or like I said, like get the bad result. Again, like going back to our example of like websites, right? You can tell it like, hey, just build me a website. And obviously, if you don't provide it the context that a normal human would need to build a cohesive website, your expectations should be as such. But in our space, like there's a lot of real interesting applications, and I can tell you even firsthand, like every proposal that I write nowadays, for the most part, I would ask it like, hey, which sections should I include? How do you sell this better, right? Like
What
how
am I
would you
forgetting?
write this?
Yeah.
Exactly. Like fact check this, right? Because again, like even simple things like typos, like you could argue, you can obviously have done that in the past, right? But it's a lot more intelligent at pinpointing locations and like why there's incongruency between things, right? Like, this is not just the text editors that we had
Yeah.
3-4 years ago. You know what I mean? There's a drastic difference, and I think like people are
Right.
still not necessarily realizing how powerful that is. Like legal terms, right? Again, sometimes you may forget what are the terms inside of your proposals, again depending on whom you're writing this for, and you can almost like automatically ingest the context for that specific customer, and like I said, find all of that
Yeah.
information that you otherwise couldn't.
Yeah,
So
that's another case where it's like, hallucinations and other stuff where like, well, just try it and check it. Like yeah, it's an indispensable tool at this point.
let me ask you a follow-up on that side, right? So if someone's looking to get set up on AI, we've talked a lot about Claude Code, right? There's
Yeah.
obviously different flavors. I know you've talked about the February or January iteration, and I still remember when it was like purely CLI. Nowadays you
Yeah.
have several options, and I think they're trying to make it more accessible, right, to the general public. So it's not just for software. What do you recommend someone who's in our space that does, like software in the industrial automation space, to get going on Claude specifically?
Yeah, I mean, one thing is, we'll see how this develops as well, but there is a big difference between the frontier models and sort of all the others. So within the world of AI tools, like if you're just, I don't want to name any particular names, but like everybody other than Claude, everybody other than Anthropic, they might be useful, but it's not the same, right? Some of them are catching up, and some of them are now they're all positioning themselves in reference to that. So I would say that's really important. Like if you're using some LLM that you don't know what's behind it, or it comes from a supplier who had it on their roadmap 18 months ago, like it's probably not the same. So I don't know how far I'd push that, where it's like not everything needs to be done with Fable or whatever. Opus is fine, but those are two where it's like it's important to have the right one. And then yeah, within Claude, I think I find just like the Claude web interface is amazing. I'm just like on my phone typing blah 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 this here. I just had an idea. Make me a 3D visualization that shows this and this and this, and it's like now make a slider for that. It's like it just does it, right? Just from the web. So I mean, it doesn't take much. I do think Claude Code is distinct in terms of like being a software development tool, but normal humans can make their own iOS apps now. Normal humans can make their own websites and ship them now. Like you just the thing to get over is like the limitation in just saying like just say it as dumb as you want. Dumber the better sometimes. Right? I'm trying to make an iOS app. I want to make an app that does this. I need a website that does that. Like don't tell it how. Like tasks, like giving it tasks anymore. It's like, oh, that's so 6 months ago, right? Give it the big picture, give it the problem, and let it run with it. And don't worry about trying to say the right thing too much. Just if it's not like what you want, just say this. If you have a reaction to it, just type that in. You don't have to tell it the answer. I'd be like, I'm feeling bad about this part, or I don't like that part. Like that's all. That's total prompt. That's all the prompt. And it's just like, boom. Here's some other ideas for you. Or I just redid that. I see what you mean. I redid it. So here, how do you think of this? It's like but that just comes from practicing and using it. Some of my crew has got it like hooked up to Slack, and they've got it hooked up to Notion, and they've got that hooked up to Cowork. So they just like, hey, with this directory of files, go make me the timing chart of this machine. Those are good things too if you're like dealing with files, right? Dealing with like Excel sheets and dealing with Word docs or whatever.
Why Cowork specifically? Because you can do that with like VS Code as well.
You can do that with VS Code, but these are like engineering documents in a folder, right? Like it's just like this came out of a zip file. You know, it's like in this folder, like go look at that. Like again, you could
Gotcha.
probably drag them on the web interface, but it's like for stuff that's quote unquote on your computer,
Yeah.
you know, or like giving it screenshots. Like I think that's what's amazing too. And this is another moment I had where I was like really impressed because I was using I don't use this very often, but I use Send Cut Send a lot. Shout out to Send Cut Send, most amazing company out there right now. They do online like laser cutting and bending, sheet metal, stuff like that. I use it for a ton of parts, and their catalog for the hardware and the different bending data, it's like you have to click on the web page to go on different tabs. And I opened the Claude plugin and I was like, make me a chart and get all this data out on CSV. It reverse engineered the JSON endpoint and hit it 100 times. And it was like, like it went to every version of the web page and gave me the CSV file that I wanted. It was like, hey, by the way, it looks like they made a typo on line 40. You want me to fix that? They put in 80 and they probably mean 0.080. And I was like, yes, please sanitize the data too. So it's like, I'm just finding a ton of cases. It's just honestly, it's all the time now. Just take a picture of something and put it in the chat and be like, here's a problem. What's going on? There's just a lot of things that you can do.
We've got a good question.
Different interfaces for it. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say we have another good question from Marcel, which I guess I have a different thought than what he's mentioning, but I'm curious to get your take on this. So something I wonder about is whether AI keeps pushing the cost of building so low that starting a new software company becomes almost trivial. And if it happens, a lot of startups may end up looking like the same underlying capability with slightly different prompts and packaging. In that world, what actually becomes the moat? And I guess my thought, and maybe this is a two-pronged question for you, David. I'm curious if we're still in the stage where AI is very cheap compared to what it should be because of the VC capital that has been invested, and whether or not the cost will go up. I don't want to say exponentially, right? But as more and more adoption happens, so I'm curious what your thoughts are when it comes to cost, and Marcel's take on trivial software companies.
I think that it is trivial to write software now. So companies that were using software as their moat are suddenly, there is no moat. So I agree with you. That moat is gone, right? And you can see that in valuations of a lot of startups, because you're like, if you're a company, you could just write your own CRM in a week and it would be tailored perfectly to your company, right? And it's like, it's kind of a joke, but it's like, it's not that far off, right? Like it's if it's not happening already, then again, it's certainly something like, well, we're not going to give Salesforce $2 million a year. I'll tell you that. We're going to do something else because now it's possible for us to make something that's tailored. Like if what you just have is something that is a piece of software, like that's not enough of a moat. But again, I mean, that's like a complete flip of what software used to be, because it used to be software was something that you had to invest a ton of capital in. It was hard to build. It was expensive. That's where the moat came from, right? It came from, it's too expensive to hire a bunch of engineers to remake this stuff. That's not the case anymore, right? And so that moat, to the extent that it was there, is now like vaporized. But I don't think that was the only moat that ever existed. That's not the only strength of a company. Right. I mean, I do think if what you had was software and that's what it was, then you're screwed. And valuations of SaaS companies is reflecting that for sure. It's like an apocalypse happening there too. But companies that are doing things in the physical world, companies that there's other ways to be strong in terms of you have good distribution, you have good business processes, you have some corner of something. Like there's all these different ways. And shout out to the Acquired podcast for talking about all the different ways that companies can be strong, other than just like, we have a piece of software that we put $1 billion into that no one wants to be able to reproduce. Like that's done.
Do you know the episode from the podcast?
That's just something they talk about different companies and talk about their different strengths and kind of like the different ways that companies can be strong in terms of, or competitive, in a way that is more than just like, we made a piece of software that became a standard that now everybody needs to use, like that's there's other ways to be strong and competitive.
Awesome. I'll need to
Absolutely.
catch up. I've listened to a lot of their stuff, but not
What was
recently.
did I answer your question, Vlad, or what? I was
My,
just saying to.
oh yeah, my question was more so, do you believe that the cost for running the
Oh,
models, right, like
cost.
the token cost, is gonna remain, or I guess like go down, or are we in this like VC funded era where capital will ultimately run out and it's going to be a lot more expensive to build software for that reason?
I think it's going to be a crazy ride because it'll be the biggest bubble ever, but that's how this works. It's how it works when we built the internet. It's how it worked when they built the railroads. It's how it worked when they built the canals in France in the 1700s. Like, tons of companies are going to get wiped out, and we're going to be left behind with this like amazing capability. So there's going to be a lot of volatility, and the cost is going to be that'll get worked out. There's a ton of money going into it now, but there's also a ton of engineering going into it now. So I think just how powerful it is, like it's hard to predict even what the cost curves are going to be, or when we build a gazillion computers and we spend $8 trillion on data centers, like that's what's going to make it. That's going to be a ton of money that goes into it. That's also going to be what makes it cheap. So it's going to be a wild ride. Not every company is going to make it. Most companies in the AI world are not going to make it. But on the other side, it's going to be pretty incredible what we're going to be able to do.
It will be very interesting. I agree with that, and thank you so much for all of your insight. As with, I think, all of the last 3 episodes we've done with you, David, we came in with a very structured list of things we wanted to ask you, and we made it through 12.5%, which always means it was a good conversation. And especially shout out and thanks to everyone in the chat for all of your questions and comments as we've been going through this. Before we let you go, we do want to ask you the last questions that we get to ask all of our guests at the end. First and foremost being one of my favorite questions, which is the predict the future question. And as I have told every single one of our guests, the hardest question anyone can ask you to do in 2026 is to predict the future of AI. And I feel like you've given us a path of what you think. But I guess tell us what you think the adoption is going to look like of artificial intelligence in this industrial space in the next 2 to 3 years.
Well, I think it's going to be bigger impact and happen sooner than even the buzzword people think, right? Like, it's here now. It's not a future thing. So it's we don't need to predict the future. It's weird enough to get used to the present.
Yeah.
Right. What's here now, the tools that you can open up a website and pay $20 and use are absolutely mind blowing. And so where that's going to take us, I mean, I'm interested in what my prediction or hope for the future would be. It gives us a lot of opportunities and more opportunities to build amazing things, right? Like, that's why do the work that I do. It's like, I want to build amazing machines and that do stuff that, give back and contribute to humanity. Like, whatever we're doing here as engineers is just getting supercharged. So like, I'm hoping that that's going to be the case. I think it is going to be the case. Like, the stuff that we're going to get to work on and the stuff that we're going to make is going to be truly mind blowing. Like, but yeah, what it'll look like, and it's hard to predict, but it's going to be a fun ride.
Absolutely. It will be a fun ride. And to very much the comments you had on the last question, it will be a fun ride. It will probably be the ride of this lifetime, comparative to all of the previous generations and what they've got to go and experience. And we are ever more interconnected as a world than any of them ever were, as we get to go watch these frontier models and everyone else's models come out. So having said that, and with the AI is actively in the process of changing the world in mind. If someone comes up to you as David Nichols, founder at Loupe, or David Nichols of SASE, and says, I'm looking to get into the industrial space, or maybe I'm looking to make a change, or maybe I am worried with the future of what job security looks like, what's the best piece of career advice you give people now in 2026?
I think the career advice is similar to a lot of the values that Loupe has had. And the values, if you look at them on our site, are really, they have a lot to do with creativity and making space to try things. And what I think is a sort of a positive case about AI of like in learning and trying things, it's an incredible tool to be able to do that. Like if you were to say like take your college professor and you can have them sit by your side and talk to them about whatever you want, and or you could have Claude. Like I'm taking Claude every time, right? I'm not worried about young people in terms of what they're going to have access to, what they're going to be able to learn, what they're going to be
Yeah.
able to like interact with in terms of teaching, coaching, trying things. Like getting into new areas of expertise is more accessible than ever in terms of learning, right? And so I would say like it's the door's right there to open and try things. Like go do it. You know, my mom was an art teacher. She'd be like, here's some finger paints, right? Go make something cool. Go make cool stuff. Like go build something, go work on something, go take an engine out of an old car. Like that's the same job. It's the same advice as ever.
I love that. I love that. So thank you for that. Next up, we want to ask you for. I think you've got a book recommendation for us this time.
I do. By way of analogy, I talked about this because in another talk that I did about artwork, but one of the favorite books I've ever read about, well, at all, but it's about the relationship of humans and technology. It's called The Making of the Atomic Bomb, and it was by Richard Rhodes.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget when it came out, 70s or 80s, but it won a Pulitzer Prize. And it tells a story of starting in the mid 1800s of the scientists who were investigating and discovering the atom. And it goes from that point up until the Trinity test, the first bomb going off. And it's incredibly detailed of like what these scientists were thinking, what they learned, the individual people involved in creating this technology, what they were thinking at the time, what their concerns were, why they were doing that in the first place. And like to create something that has such power and also danger, I think it's a perfect analogy to what we're dealing with AI today. And we forget that we live in a world where nuclear weapons exist, but this is something that we've had to confront as a society for a long time about technology. And it's very interesting to read now. And you know, as you read it, you can think back and be like, I wonder which part of this we're in today with AI, right? But yeah, you can read of how they did that, why they did that. There's a lot of similarities because some of the scientists were like, well, in order to do that, you'd have to turn the entire country into a factory. And the US government was like, that's what we're going to do. Here's $2 billion of 1944 money. Like, and they went and did it, right? That's what's happening now with data centers. That's what's happening now in industry. So it's happened before. It's happening again. So what's that going to mean? Is that going to mean unlimited free energy with no carbon, or is it going to mean that we destroy the world in 5 minutes? It could be both. It is both.
It is both. I'm not sure anyone has ever given such a good and just abjectly terrifying parallelism for what we may
Don't worry,
be going
Dave.
through.
It's going to be fine.
I was gonna say, at least we know what Dave is gonna have his nightmares about this evening.
I need to watch Dr. Strangelove. Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. No, that is fantastic. Thank you so much for this. Next question we want to ask you is talking about like ideas and innovation. So let's say you've got a guy, his name is Vlad. This is the Vlad up here for anyone watching live. And he becomes an entrepreneur in residence for either Loupe or SASE. And it's day one. And he's like, David, I'm here. I've got my extra large cup of coffee. What do I start with? What do I start with? What direction are you sending? What direction are you sending, Vlad?
What are we building?
I think Vlad would sit down and we would say, Vlad, I want to hear about every brownfield you've ever seen. We're going to go one by one and talk to them, and we're going to rewrite all of them with AI, and we're going to ship it faster than you could possibly imagine. So let's call up all those companies that you can't name on this podcast, and let's go retrofit all their equipment so that it works better than ever. Like that's what we would go do. Let's go rip all that old stuff out and put this new stuff in. It's easier.
It's chugging along. It's 24/7.
No, it's not. No, it's not, Vlad. It's not chugging along, and you know that. And that's what I'm tired of hearing. That it's a lie. It's not chugging along. It's breathing potentially its last breath every second. It's barely alive. It never should have lived this long. We need to put it out to pasture. Let's make some equipment that we're not terrified is going to go down. And come on, man. No offense to the work that people have done. I'm sure they're working hard keeping it going, but the equipment out there is on life support. Let's get some new blood in here. Let's do some
It's the lack of
retrofits.
maintenance. I blame the lack of maintenance.
You blame the lack of maintenance. Well,
based on the manuals we provided them that they should.
Well,
we can make them some new manuals. We'll make
I
them
was
some
gonna
new
say,
manuals.
We
That'll
haven't
be what we
maintained
start
it.
with.
We didn't have manuals to begin with, so we might as well rip it all out and start over again. That is a very interesting thread that you brought up earlier, David, and I am honestly really excited to see what that turns into. That is not within like the top probably 20 use cases that I have pondered leveraging the AI tools for. And so I'm really interested to go see that mixture of AI solutions and new hardware and humans who know the process well enough to be able to retrofit it in a much more expedient process than we ever have, which is what will need to happen in order to actually get those retrofits moving.
We got all the pieces right here. Yeah, let's do it. Or Vlad, you can help me make the ultimate like Rockwell maintenance tech who will refuse to allow access into the building. It would be a new security system. We're going to have to replace all those guys. They're retiring so fast.
I like it. I like it.
Never a lack of ideas there, David. So thank you so much for this. Last question for you is, who should reach out? Who are you looking to connect with? Kind of your open platform to ask our listeners for, I mean, all of the listeners who are still listening, if they don't somehow know you, what is your ask of them?
Yes. Well, first of all, I'm not joking about the retrofits. Like we want to do retrofits. Let's modernize all this stuff. It's easier and cheaper than ever. But yeah, like I would love for folks who are interested and kind of want to follow along and want to be part of a community that's not arguing whether we should improve things or innovate, but is sort of how are we going to and how are we going to learn from each other. Check out SASE at sase.space, SASE.space, and come join the Slack. It's free. Just come in and kind of say hello and follow along as Davey teaches us how to bring AI into the future of automation. And yeah, Loupe is an integrator. We've done a lot of interesting and challenging projects over the years. And so yeah, we're an engineering services company. Call us up and we'll help you out. We'll be a good integrator for you.
I love that. Thank you so much for that, David. I will say that after you said join.loupe.space, I did throw that immediately into the chat. So
thank you. Thank you, Dave.
Yes. Right at the beginning. And so we will have, that is in the chat. If you guys are watching live, if you guys are watching it on repeat, if you're on the show notes format, Vlad will absolutely go ahead and put the links in there because he's absolutely he's much better than I ever would be on putting the links in the show notes for all of our listeners.
Thank you.
David, thank you so much. Everyone, thank you for coming and hanging out. Please make sure you're following David Nichols and Loupe and SASE for all of the fun, amazing things that they're doing that doesn't really seem like real, but I'm pretty sure they're a real company now at almost 20 years old doing all of these fun things. Make sure you're following Manufacturing Hub as well as Vlad and myself. Every week we've got new shows. Some of them are kind of this cool. Some of them are cool in other different fun ways that are slightly less AI focused. If you guys have made it this far in YouTube or podcast format, you're absolutely fantastic. Please hit the like and share and subscribe and rate us 5 stars buttons. When I ask and Vlad launches the podcast on Thursdays, more of you listen, which is pretty cool.